and I stopped using Reddit entirely. And what has happened is a completely unexpected outcome, which is that it has dramatically changed my mental health and how I feel about myself.
Can we make a maximally engaging feed that is also maximally truth-seeking? Yeah.
Social media just took this and personalized it to a degree that cable television never could do.
Hey, I'm Om.
I'm Christian.
And today we're going to be doing a deep dive on feeds, right? So we're going to start at pre-algorithmic feeds from Facebook and Twitter, looking at the chronological feed, and then seeing how that evolved over time as more users started using the app, how it became more algorithmic, and how we started ranking certain feeds. So you showed certain information at the top and a lot of it was lost. And then what effect did that have on the users and how that split people into creators and consumers? Next, we're going to look at what some current protocols are doing about this problem, where you have this really positive discovery element of a feed, but there are also some negative attributes which result in polarization and outrage. So there's some people tackling these problems. We'll go over some open source protocols, and then we'll even look at a group of researchers and experimenters on Bluesky who are trying to make curated feeds more common.
Yeah. Last week, we talked about a broad survey, a lot of different problems we were experiencing and we were seeing with social media usage. And in that time, since then, you have done a lot more research on feeds specifically. And even during that, I think you've been really, really focused on the feed curation aspect, which is really, really interesting. I think it's one component of a much broader ecosystem, but I think it's really, really impactful.
Yeah.
And I've had a few personal experiences over the past month that have really made that salient to me.
And even this past weekend, we had one experience. We went to a conference together where we actually found a group of people who are interested in decentralized feeds and this question around how can I curate my information diet. So then you spoke for a few minutes about your recent experiments in curating your information diet.
Yeah. So for context, about a month ago, I made a dramatic change to my social media diet. Last episode, we talked a lot about you can't really know what's real online. You can't really know who is real, what users are real, and what content is real. And I've made a very intentional push to try to find platforms and build platforms that are surfacing that. And my main social media usage before this was Reddit. And I had this realization that all the people I was talking to on Reddit, when it's in text form, you really can't know who's real. A paper almost 2 years ago now showed that modern LLMs absolutely smashed the Turing test. We'll add a link to that paper as well as others in the description of the video if people want to see it. But really, there's no way of knowing in text form who's a real person anymore. And some people might disagree with that. Some people might think I know it's real, but I think the research is showing that that's really not the case. When prompted well, these LLMs are indistinguishable from people. So I made a decision. I want to stop engaging with people on Reddit because I don't know what's real. And I want to find a platform that's surfacing that. And I stopped using Reddit entirely. And what has happened is a completely unexpected outcome, which may not be surprising to a lot of people, but was very surprising to me, which is that it has dramatically changed my mental health and how I feel about myself. And it just made the problem of feeds and how much they affect my thinking and my feeling every day very, very salient.
Right. So then you completely took out Reddit from your life for a period of time. And I know you also recently have opened the platform a few times just to see how the feeds like changed now that you've been off it for a few days, maybe a few weeks. Have you checked it all? Have you checked it at all recently?
Oh, yeah. So I added a blocker that I can't open it at all, except for like 1 30-minute period from 11 to 11:30 p.m. And I give myself a space to just explore again. Oh, is this something I was actually enjoying? So I opened it back up at 11 p.m. a couple times, and immediately my heart rate spiked. It started showing me a bunch of links to articles that were really, really anxiety-inducing. So for context, I would say I have the tendency to be an anxious person sometimes. And one of the facets of this is I just get really fixated on ideas. And I really, really want to go down these rabbit holes to resolve this tension that I feel. Like I'm really anxious about something. I'm really anxious about some topic. I just need to read about it constantly to try to know how to resolve this uncertainty. And this is a very common thing in anxiety, and you really can't. And what I realized was this feed was just surfacing all of those things and was trained by my behaviors to just keep surfacing these things to me. So I opened it. I saw all of these incredibly inflammatory posts. My heart rate spiked. I closed it again, and I was like, this isn't good for me. This isn't, not only is it not making me happy, I don't think it's showing me an accurate slice of what's true. It's just showing me what it makes me engage with it.
Right. And I guess we'll go into this a bit later as well. The nature of what a feed currently looks like and some potential alternatives to it. What I'm hearing from this story is there's two things, right? There's one, you are essentially giving up agency and then asking the algorithm, what should I see next? So it's providing you the information, the content that it thinks will keep you on the platform longer. And maybe if one pathway is anxiety inducing information, it'll be that. Another thing is there's no natural ending point. If I look at a healthier version of consuming information, or at least a more fun version, in my opinion,
Mm,
it's like when you just browse the web, look at different articles, you compare takes from different articles, you get a really nuanced take, maybe even go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole where there's a natural ending where you decide, okay, I've collected enough information and now I'm going to leave this piece of technology. I think if we can reintroduce that sort of element to feeds, that would be like a direction we could explore a bit later.
totally. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Cool. Let's get some context on the main question that we're trying to tackle today, which is, can we make a maximally engaging feed that is also maximally truth seeking?
Mm.
So to give some context around this
Can I give an
idea,
answer to that question?
uh, sure. Before, yeah, well, give a shot at it. Yeah,
Real quick, I
yeah,
want to say I think that framing is a little
yeah.
unfair because
Okay.
maximally useful
Yeah,
and maximally informative, or like maximally engaging
yeah.
and maximally informative at the limits are not the same thing. So you can't have both at the same time.
Right.
Maximally engaging begins to have a trade-off against truthfulness. I don't think you're going to make a
Yeah.
feed that's more maximally engaging that these current platforms
Right.
built.
Yeah.
They're built to be maximally engaging.
There will definitely be a trade off, but I don't want to lose too much on the engagement grounds,
Sure,
because something
sure.
that I noticed is like, okay, I can have a very truthful feed, but some experiments I've done with a very truthful feed,
Yeah.
it just gets so boring,
Mm,
and it's like I realized collaborative filtering is a powerful algorithm for a reason.
mm.
Collecting the interest vectors across a large group of people is a really powerful technique, and I want to leverage the upsides of that and use technology to limit some of the downsides. So maybe not maximally engaging, but keep it high. That
Totally.
make that a goal of ours, right?
I think that's a great framing, and I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. There has to be a level of engagement that makes it interesting. So I think your question is,
Mhm,
can we make feeds that are engaging enough to be interesting while
mhm.
also keeping a firm commitment to truthfulness, what fulfills the user, what makes them happy, what helps them achieve whatever's that basically that are useful to the user while also being interesting and engaging.
Right, exactly. I will accept that framing
Well,
for
then
this
my
question.
tentative answer to that
Yeah.
question would be yes, I hope so.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we're
That's why
here.
we're here. Yeah.
So, for some context on how the feed became to what it is now.
Yeah.
So, in 2009, Facebook had but before 2009, Facebook had their chronological feed. And that was when you had maybe 150 to like 500 people that you wanted to keep up with. And that was pretty good when you had a small group of people and you just wanted to see what was up in their lives. But as the daily active users grew on these platforms in 2009, they switched to an algorithmic feed with a lot of content. You obviously have to bubble up some information at the top, and a lot of it gets lost. And then in 2016, Twitter followed. How can we think about the steps that happened to get from chronological to algorithmic? I think at every step of the way, they made locally rational choices
Mhm.
to get to this algorithmic feed. They thought, okay, like rationally, if you have a lot of media on the platform, it doesn't make sense for people just to be barraged with this like massive chronological feed of like say 5,000 people, right?
Mm.
So I think the algorithmic feed definitely is necessary and it is useful. So I think those are two things that we should definitely like premises I want to build off of.
I like your description. I think a few things hidden in that narrative and that story is that feeds can do multiple different things,
Yeah.
and there are multiple different use cases bundled up into these platforms, which we talked about last episode as well. But if I only have 50 to 100 people that I care about online, wanting to see updates from them does lend itself a lot more to a chronological feed. If I want to use this as a central source of information curation for anything I might care about in the world,
Mhm.
then ranking becomes a lot more important and then chronology matters a lot less. And the more projecting this is, the more this is covering a broad scope outside of your circle, the more curation you need because the information of the world is just so massive. So that's it's almost like sometimes when you engage with your feed, you want different things, or sometimes when you come to different platforms, you want different things. And it would be nice if there was just a platform that was building this is just a feed to stay in contact with your friends, or this is just a feed to see what the major news is happening in the world. But all platforms have been sort of converging towards this maximal engagement
I see. Okay.
feed, right?
Yeah, so naturally, like, we are seeing a split, right? So you would use your iMessages and WhatsApp and Telegrams with your small community to build that, like how you would communicate and keep up with your friends and family, right? So then just thinking about this as a feed, right? We're no longer thinking about keeping in contact with people. We can think a bit about the impacts of this in the world, right? So in the past decade, we know that it's actually had some positive impacts, right? So if you think of Arab Spring. Social media
Mm.
has helped people who felt like they were alone connect with other people who felt like, okay, we're not alone in this battle against an oppressive dictator, and they could potentially even like step up. They could band together and then like throw over an oppressive government, right? But I think something interesting with that story is after this group of people in Tunisia, Egypt, actually overthrew the government, the same technology that helped them band together and make this positive change actually started like polarizing the two groups in the Middle East as well. So it's almost like this directly outlines the positive side of algorithmic feeds, which connect people for a positive change in the world, and then it directly shows the negative effects. Even in Myanmar, it showed how it polarized views between people of Myanmar and the Rohingya people. So, if not controlled, if not moderated, these feeds can take a very dark turn and like potentially even like contribute to genocide. So this is definitely, I think, like a problem worth solving.
Would you agree that all feeds seem to be converging towards this maximal engagement metric? It's almost like Instagram started as the your friends feed,
Yeah.
and Reddit started as the news aggregator feed, and TikTok started as the short form entertainment feed. They all seem to be converging towards this whatever maximizes your engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. That is what has been happening for the past few years, especially. Everyone is really doubling down on this maximally engaging feed to make profit, right? So thinking about what impact this has on the world,
Mm.
even in America, it's polarizing a lot of the country. Like it's polarizing a lot of the left and right.
I have a tough follow up for you there.
Okay. Yeah, I want to
I
hear
think
this.
that's a great point.
Yeah.
I was going to say that actually,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure if you agree with that. I was going to say that I think social media is had a strong polarizing force on people in politics, but I wasn't sure if you were going to agree with that strong statement, and you made it for me.
Yeah.
But then my follow up question was, if you look at the data, polarization started before social media. Polarization really
Mhm.
started to take off decades ago, maybe even in the 90s,
Mhm.
80s, even. And my question is going to be, or my question to you
Mhm.
is if this has been happening before social media, is social media the culprit? Is it an accelerator, or is it none of the above? Is it
Right.
completely independent?
It's an accelerator.
An accelerator.
Because before you had social media, you would have these debates with humans. You'd have them
Mm-hmm.
with people. So you would have maybe people in your local community that you would agree or disagree with. Almost,
I was like, before your view of before social media is everybody lives in a village. That's not where we live. It wasn't you had these debates with people.
wait, no. It's
Before social media, it was Fox News and Rush Limbaugh. Those were not conversations with people. Fox News was like social media, but
mhm.
on cable television.
Sure. Okay.
That's
Yeah. I guess.
anybody who likes Fox News. I'm
Yeah.
sorry if you think it's an unfair representation
Yeah.
of what Fox News is.
Okay. I guess I'm going too far. Actually, I'm
Yeah,
thinking it's just like if people are more like people were more communal. They like talk to more people. But I guess yeah, you got your information through traditional news.
I can add to this narrative.
Yeah.
Here's my answer to this,
Yeah.
which feel free to disagree.
Okay.
There is a general trend in society that predates social media towards private institutions maximizing delivery of what people, what you might call revealed user preferences of what they
Hmm.
want to engage with. Fox News from its very early days was operating with a philosophy of whatever people want to watch, we'll show them more of,
Hmm.
right? And when you throw when you maximize user engagement in whatever form that is
Hmm.
on cable television, network ratings, whatever it is, you give people a version of whatever it is that maximally engages them, which enrages them, which makes them furious or whatever it
Hmm.
is, right?
Yeah.
Social media just took this and personalized it to a degree that cable television never could do. Cable TV can't see what channels you're scrolling in real time
Right.
constantly. It can't get a complete view of what you're watching. So social media amplified this, but it is a representation of a phenomenon that's been happening in society for decades before that, right?
Right. Right. So they
So
personally tailored the outrage to each person in a more addictive format rather than a general traditional news media that
totally.
would outrage people. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think that's
Yeah.
my view of it, although
Yeah.
that is there's so many assumptions baked into that narrative, which I don't want. I think everybody could pick out 10 different things that disagree with that. I'm not going to tell you that that is absolutely true, but
Yeah.
that's sort of how I've been able to fit together what we're
Yeah.
observing and the data that I've seen.
Yeah.
Right.
And then just to back up my village claim,
Okay.
it's
Tell me.
I think it is true that screen time is going up.
Mm,
So that means people are people are spending less time talking to their friends and family in real life. And
totally.
when you do have extremely high screen time, and most of that being outrage that you see on these social media platforms, it completely makes sense that people stop humanizing people and the start like labeling people into like extreme categories, left or right.
Mm.
So I think like that definitely can contribute to polarization as well. Maybe, yeah,
I'm not sure I agree with that thesis. I think your thesis is increased screen time
yeah,
results in people viewing other people as polarized, which maybe I think maybe a simpler
hmm
thesis is increased screen time increases polarization. I don't know if that's a much more testable thesis, which I
hmm
would want to check the data to see.
hmm
What I have seen from the research, and I will link some of these research papers
hmm
in the description, is when screen time increases to the point where it starts replacing in-person communications,
yeah,
it results in greater net unhappiness and greater loneliness, which maybe it's not a stretch to say greater loneliness and greater unhappiness results in more dissatisfaction and more political polarization. But that's even a stretch that I'm not
yeah,
prepared to
yeah.
make.
We
But
don't have the research claims, but we're just making, yeah,
yeah, I
general
think
claims.
any experiment that tries to find the marginal cost of screen time, meaning
Yeah,
is 10 extra minutes of screen time bad for you, is probably not. Maybe hasn't really found a strong correlation, but there does seem to be a threshold when it starts to replace other aspects of your life which are important: your hobbies, who you care about, seeing people, doing out and going out and touching grass.
mhm,
Like when you get to 10 hours, 12 hours a day, then it starts to be a problem, right?
right, right. So feeds originally started to, I guess, allow people to share their opinions or commentary on public issues. And then as these creators started making started depending on their livelihood from these creator jobs and needed to make money from it, they they essentially just reverse engineered the algorithm. So that's why like a very popular a YouTube feed would be really bright colors, really flashy thumbnails, very flashy titles like the ones you'll probably see on this YouTube channel, because that's what you need to do to capture the attention of most people. And then
Mm.
not even like the most popular TikToks and Instagrams, the first 1.5 seconds needs to have a visual hook, some sort of like jarring first sentence said to like snap you out of this like stream of consciousness as you're scrolling through your feeds. So yeah, it definitely gets really optimized to the algorithm specifically for creators, and it's not a sustainable business model for creators. They get very burnt out and they like churn really fast off these platforms.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's an interesting framing.
yeah,
It sounds like what you're saying is the incentive structures of the feeds make it so the majority of creators' energy and effort has to go into maximizing their feed ranking as opposed to the quality of their content, right?
yes, hmm
But my follow-up question to that is that a problem with the incentive structure? Is that just a limitation of the information capabilities of humans in discovery format, right? You
yeah.
can't condense an entire video down into, hey, this is what we're going to tell you and what we're going to talk about, into a deliverable package that people can just see and know about. So you have to try to catch their attention in more dark pattern ways, if you will, right?
Right, and
How would you ever solve that?
so I think that's the question we want to talk about. How can we inject intentionality into
Mm,
feeds instead of giving up your agency into the action of scrolling? After you see a piece of content, could you almost use your curiosity, use your agency to think about what sort of media do you want to see next,
mm,
right? And that is higher lift, that's higher effort to do that. So it's much easier to make a feed that's extremely easy. And I think those feeds will still stick around for a while because I think like that really easy, low friction way of exploring the internet is something that a lot of people find entertainment in, and is unlikely that everyone will switch away from it. But I think there are a group of people who probably would switch to a more intentional method, as we've seen that because people do care about this problem, right?
mm.
So I guess do you want to give a quick overview of the current open source protocols that we've looked through?
Yeah. Before we even made the last episode, we've been just going deep on a lot of different open source social media protocols and social media platforms. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening right now. It almost feels like we are at the precipice of a new movement in social media where centralization is starting to end. That could be way too optimistic, but there's a lot of technologies out there that I never would have imagined five years ago, and it seems really exciting. So the main three that we've looked deeply into are ActivityPub, AT Protocol, and Nostr. Each of those have a platform that are built on them, although a lot of them have multiple platforms built on them. ActivityPub is the oldest one, I think. It's been around since 2018-ish, 2017, and that's what Mastodon is built on. It is also what Threads is supposedly built on, although really Meta launched Threads first and then decided to semi-support ActivityPub as a way of what seems like just getting more users or getting excitement for it, but it doesn't seem to be built in the same motivation that other platforms have been built on ActivityPub. ActivityPub is the core mechanism is individually federated servers. So the network is of servers, and then the servers do everything all at once at the same place. They do user management, they do feed curation, they do data management, all that stuff, and they sort of open up the data through interface protocols. So an example, probably the best example seems to be SMTP or email. If you think of Gmail is essentially a closed ecosystem where they control your user sign up, they control all of your emails, they control all of your communications. The only thing that you can do is you can send emails into the Gmail system and you can send emails out of the Gmail system. But aside from the structure of the SMTP protocol for emails, Gmail is sort of like a central ecosystem for emails. And you can also completely communicate within Gmail that never leave the ecosystem. It seems to me ActivityPub is very similar. Threads, for example, can send posts out of and into Threads, but their entire ecosystem is they're including the user control, their users, their data, and the feeds is all centrally within one server. Then you have AT protocol, which I briefly mentioned Bluesky last week, but Bluesky is just an app layer built on top of the AT protocol, which is mostly run by the Bluesky, the company, but it is fully open source and each of the components are more modular. So one of the reasons I really love AT protocol out of the gate is each of the different components are much more modular. So not only is the message protocol between different servers and users open source, and you can see, and all the data is open source. The individual components you can mix and match and build your own. So the user servers themselves, which host the user profiles and all the user data, those are fully portable. Yeah, you can set up your own user server, your own PDS, or you can set up one within the Bluesky ecosystem. Your user, your data, everything on there is portable to different PDSs. You can also set up your own app front end, your own app layer. I don't know, is the Bluesky app fully open source? Yeah, it is, right? Yeah. The whole Bluesky app is just open source, and you can go add your own features, or you can copy it and just set up your own app layer. The data stream itself is fully open, so you can set up your own app and then start listening to that stream yourself and make your own front end app layer. There's also the feed endpoints are open source, which is what we really like. You can completely set up your own feed. You can sort of democratize your feed in a way that's revolutionary on social media. You don't like what these feed is showing you, you can construct your own. You've been going deep into trying to construct your own feed. You can also set up the main centralized component are relays, which is the thing that indexes all the data from the different PDSs. Bluesky has the main relays right now, but you can set up your own relays if you want. It's just a lot of work to index all the PDSs and index all the user data and then centralize it into a stream that can be soon consumed by the app front ends. There's also labelers, which are these independent components where you can add context and different labels onto different pieces of content, whatever. So that's AT protocol is another open source protocol, which is somewhere in the middle. And then on the other side, you have Nostr, which is very, very lightweight. It's like the most lightweight of all the protocols. It is basically just a secret key that you associate to your profile, and your profile isn't really hosted anywhere. You can make content from any server and send it to multiple different relays, but there doesn't seem to be much structure at all, which makes it very hard to build on. One of the nice things about AT protocol is there's enough centralization where they're solving a lot of the hard problems like indexing, spam filtering, data aggregation without making them locked in, so you can still implement your own components and you can make your own feeds, you can make your own relays. Versus Nostr, there's just like no centralization at all. So it almost feels just like network computer servers, where it's just like you host your own profile anywhere, but good luck trying to collect and aggregate data across the whole network. If I had to summarize a narrative, and I think anybody who works in these protocols would maybe strongly disagree with me, or there's a billion complaints you could hurl at this framing, but here's the rough framing I have in my brain. There is a spectrum of centralization to fully decentralized. And though there is value to centralization and there's value to decentralization, but the two extremes feel bad in different ways. So the extreme of centralization is the ecosystem we're in right now. Every social media platform is a completely walled garden. They control everything from the users, the data, to the feeds, the network effects. They control everything, right? Fully decentralized is nobody controls everything. We all exist as just an encryption key on the internet, and we're all our individuals. Where we are our encryption key, and nobody can have influence over any component of the system. Now, centralization has value because to some extent, some amount of centralization allows you to curate, collect information about the system as a whole and positively influence certain aspects of the system. One example is spam. If you have a strong view over the entire system and all the interactions between the users, you can downweight obvious spam. You can downweight malicious actors who join the network with a clear desire to to abuse this communication channel for their own personal gain. That's spam. Full centralization has the reverse problem we're talking about right now, which is lack of transparency, lack of insight, lack of control over the experience. The experience is fully controlled by whoever controls that system. So from these protocols, the rough overview I see of these protocols is one extreme is what we exist right now. One step down from fully walled gardens is ActivityPub. No surprise that the first time Mark Zuckerberg or Meta has dipped its toe into decentralized social media networks, it went from fully walled garden to ActivityPub, because ActivityPub is just one single step down the decentralization where individual actors still control the entire experience top down, but it's opening up the door to sharing content between different federated servers. One step down from that along this chain would be AT protocol, which is the information is open source and all the different components are open source and modular as well. Although in practice, there's a few components along the way that are more centralized control. The relays are one example of that, although anybody can build their own relay. And then the full other end is Nostr, which, if I were to describe it, is sort of like a cryptocurrency attempt at a social media network. And there's a strong overlap between Nostr and the crypto community. The problem is when you have full decentralization and all you are is an encryption key, is there's no ability to impose any positive benefit on the network. So there's no ability for somebody to step in and be like, this set of people are doing bad things. This set of actors are clearly trying to spam everybody, or this set of actors are trying to control the network in order to take it down, whatever it is. Like you lose the ability to fight centralized control battles. So you need to find a balance on these protocols.
Right. I like this framing of a ladder, right? So
Yeah.
so if we're looking in the middle of the ladder, we want the upsides of some cooperation between people, some moderation, and we
Exactly.
don't want the downsides of complete anarchy, right?
Yeah.
So looking into the Bluesky protocol, there's a few people.
AT protocol, not Bluesky. Bluesky is the major contributor, but it is an open source protocol.
Okay. As I've been exploring Bluesky on AT protocol, I've found a few accounts that have been actually creating their own feed generators, and I've been getting some traction. So I want to highlight one user I found. His name is Space Cowboy on Bluesky. Essentially, just making a feed called the For You feed that has 50,000 likes, and has been making consistent posts every week, and has grown a community of people who are contributing to the feed, providing like positive, negative feedback, and then he's been sort of adjusting it for the users on Bluesky. And something interesting I thought that this For You feed is doing is it has a website where you can introspect into your feed. So you can look at topics that are being surfaced, and you can look at topics that are being muted, and there's a number of hyperparameters that you can control. So you can change the nature of your feed in terms of like how much it's weighting certain content.
Tough question for you. I think that's a real interesting framing.
Yeah.
You use the term hyperparameters, which got me excited, but I have a feeling that's not going to get 90% of people excited. When 90% of people hear hyperparameters, they're going to be like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like,
Yeah.
90% of people are going to hear hyperparameters and think, God, what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
So if you're the average non-technical person, why should you care about hyperparameters or feed introspection? And is it possible to introspect it without knowing what hyperparameters are?
Right. So I think these early stages of feed curation are attracting a group of people who obviously care a lot about it and want to fine tune it like as granular as they possibly can. And these are like the innovators, right?
Mm.
I think there are a group of people though who do care about the problem of feed curation, but maybe don't want this extremely granular control over it. So to help this group of people, to provide value to this group of people, we're thinking about different mechanisms that are a bit easier to adjust and curate your feed.
Mm.
One potential solution could just be using an LLM that you can talk to and see and use that to interface with the mechanics of your feed. So through natural language, you can describe the topics that you want to see, the topics you don't want to see, and through that we can develop some personal like memory profile of how we should step two filter your feed so that it aligns more with what you want to see on Blue Sky.
Something that I feel like has been very salient to me
Hmm.
after my experience on Reddit and leaving the platform is that it's hard to know what you want to see. And it's hard to know that a specific system of passive consumption is good or bad for you.
Hmm.
And I almost feel like, absent from the hyperparameter discussion, we need a way to solve this for the average person would be a way of surfacing what their feed is showing them in a meta way and be like, hey, you saw a lot of posts about how XYZ is trying to do something really bad. And this may be negatively impacting you in this way.
Hmm.
Or you saw an unusual sample of these types of posts, which got you really mad, but this is a biased view. Sort of like what Ground News is trying to do. We
Hmm.
talked about them before, but in a social media feed that's not specifically targeted towards journalism,
Hmm.
being sort of like a co-pilot to your feed.
Hmm.
You don't want you don't
Interesting.
want to have to be an architect for your feed because that's a lot of work. But
Hmm.
you also don't want to be fully passive either because
See.
then you have no insight into what's happening and you've released agency into your information diet. You want something in the middle, which is you're accepting a passive experience with a lot more engagement and a lot more surface like a product that's surfacing to you what you're seeing in a curated way and like letting you know that you're seeing a lot of things in a certain way.
Yeah. So this is essentially the exact problem I ran into when I made the
Mm,
initial version of the feed.
interesting.
So the initial version that I thought of directly from this hyperparameter tuning method of creating my feed was let me make this chatbot where people can tell it exactly what they want to see with free text, and that was very hard for the people that I showed it to.
Mm,
So then the next step to maybe making it a bit easier, maybe decreasing the friction and collecting information from users was to reverse prompt them in the same way that like Claude Code would like reverse prompt you and like ask you
interesting.
a multiple choice series of questions in from a question from a question from the context that you give the feed. So if I said I was very interested in science, technology, and biology, it would then ask me a series of multiple choice questions asking what I would like to focus more in on. Would I
Yeah.
like to see academic papers? Would I like to see individual experimentation? And then I would ask what I don't want to see. Do I want
Yeah.
to see? I don't want to see a lot of the polarization around funding around science and technology. So maybe that information I wouldn't have originally given to the LM because I didn't know that's what I wanted in my feed. But leading questions could definitely get us a bit closer there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love this. I
Yeah.
think what's so what this is reminding me of
Mhm.
is we went to a presentation by David Eagleman.
Yeah.
He came in and talked to our team, and he had this really interesting idea of a feed where you can build it in a way that, based off of neuroscience research and based off
Mhm.
of what the psychology research shows us about being exposed to other people's beliefs, you could create a feed in a way that slowly introduces you to opposing positions in a way that circumvents your biases to
Mm.
be really combative towards them.
Yeah.
And we were all like, that's so cool. I want to see a feed that looks like that. And then we realized there's no platform that lets you do that. No
Yeah.
platform is like, oh, you have this really interesting experiment you want to run on your information diet. Let's open up the knob so you can do that. They don't do that for you.
Mhm.
And it would
Right.
be cool to have a platform that gave you a surface to experiment with that own information diet for yourself, right?
Right. So a co-pilot that analyzes your interaction pattern on, for example, AT protocol as one of the protocols we could experiment on, and surfaces, okay, here's a line of a topic that you've been more interested in recently. Here's the specific elements of this topic that you've been more interested. Why has this like is this intentional, right? Do you intentionally want to explore more about this topic, or is this something that maybe you didn't have the highest agency in this moment, and it's something you actually don't want to see more of, if that's the case, we can actually like remove this topic from your feed, right? So I like the idea. I like the framing of a co-pilot here.
And it doesn't have to be remove or add. It doesn't have to be that explicit.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the nuance from feeds comes from the fact that your instinctual behaviors are neither in your own best interest
Hmm.
nor in the interest of what's true.
Yeah.
It's sort of your own biases when you're
Mhm.
looking at a vertical scrolling feed will just push you to something. And it would be great if a some sort of co-pilot were to let you know, hey, your tendencies have been to click on these kind of things, just to let you know.
Yeah.
That's giving you a strong biased perspective on this set of things.
Yeah.
If you want to keep doing that, it's totally fine, but just surface that slice of information to you to let
Yeah.
you know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, I actually really want that information for myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you think of like that'd be like very interesting, right? So after you scroll for maybe 30 minutes, maybe it's on Reddit, maybe it's
Yeah.
on X or something, it would give you a summary of here's the topics that you decided to go more down, and here's what you here's like some new things that like you previously didn't scroll as much, and like and then like now for the first time you kind of went down this rabbit hole. But yeah, that would be like that would be extremely beneficial, I think, even for myself. I kind of just want that tool for myself.
I love this.
Yeah.
Another tough question
Yeah.
for you. What's stopping the big existing platforms from doing this? Why aren't they doing this? And if they got a strong enough signal, would they do this?
Well, I think so. We've seen a few platforms experiment with this, right? So I've seen on Instagram you can go in and delete or add tags of what you want to see more of, but it's kind of hidden. You have to go through like 3 or 4 clicks in settings to get there, and it doesn't feel like a natural UI UX flow to just have it on the Reels page. And I think obviously it's because they don't want uh they want you to rely more on how the feed will automatically place you
Yeah.
instead of you tailoring what you want. But I think they are exposing it for the people like who do want to go in and find it, right? And then we see Threads also potentially experimenting with Dear Algo, where you have to essentially make a tweet about how you want to change your feed, and then it'll change it. I don't think people really want to publicly broadcast
Yeah.
how they want to change their feed over time. But I haven't really seen a comprehensive, almost co-pilot for guiding how you want to tailor your feed.
Let me rephrase this question. Not what are current platforms building right now that look like this?
Mhm.
Is there anything structurally about the way these platforms exist and make money that would prevent them from doing this fully if they got wind that
Oh,
this is
sure,
really
yeah,
starting to be
right. It would
productive?
decrease their session time. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's a fair frame. That's a fair point. That's kind of what I was wondering, although I
yeah.
didn't necessarily mean to say that is true. It's not like their session time is going to go down. Obviously, can't do it, but there has been. We have heard from people who work
Hmm.
at these platforms that they have tried experiments like this before that have decreased session time and they were killed. Not these specific experiments, but any sort of experiment which is meant to improve the healthiness of your feed or your information diet,
Hmm.
which then reduces session time, is killed.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
it almost feels like we can't expect the major platforms to build these things, right?
Right. They can't invest too much of their time and resources to this because those projects have killed. So that's why we can come in and potentially on because we don't have those incentives that they have.
Yeah.
We can invest time and resources to this problem.
Of course, the
Yeah.
follow up question would be what's going to stop us from becoming like that, right? And I think one of the big bets that we have, one of the big hypotheses we have, is that by building in an open source ecosystem,
Mhm.
you can build a level of accountability with your product that users demand in order to maintain this level of intentionality. For example, Instagram in the early days, maybe people in my generation remember this, maybe you don't, used to have a you're all done for the day. So
Mhm.
when you saw all the updates from your friends, you'd get a little thing that was like, you're finished with the day. Good job, right?
Mhm.
And that gave people a sense of completion with their Instagram feed. One of the very first things that Mark Zuckerberg did was like, I forget who we heard from, but somebody who was there at the time was like, he said, "This is ridiculous. Why do you have this? Get rid
Mhm.
of this." It's one of the first things he got rid of because it puts a cap on session time,
Mhm.
right? And if you were to look at the numbers of how many people leave after seeing that, I'm sure it was like 80% of users leave after they see that. And if we were to start with a system like this, and then we were to get enough users and be like, let's eliminate that, then building in an open source ecosystem or a decentralized or partially decentralized ecosystem allows users the ability to leave when that feature goes away. When they're like, hey, you're not doing the thing that we joined you for, we're going to port our existing structure our existing profile, our ecosystem to another product on this platform or in this
Right.
ecosystem.
Right.
Right.
They can move they have access to all their posts, they have access to their interaction history,
Yeah.
and they can completely choose to just unassign or unpin the feed generator we make and then pin another one that aligns more with their values.
Yeah.
So we have an incentive to keep them happy, and we can't really like force them into our feed generator.
It's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
I think I briefly mentioned this last week where I was so sad when Blue Sky first took off because it was so blue pill. It was like so liberal bias, and it still is liberal bias when you open it today. But there's so much magic hiding underneath this liberal coded platform that truly has the opportunity to make social media a more healthy place for everybody. And I just wish that this brand or like I wish Blue Sky would get better as an app. I wish people would see this. I wish this context would go out there, which is why we're making this
Yeah.
podcast. I'm like, there's so much of an opportunity for this to just make everybody happier and
Yeah.
healthier and to build products on this space that are just better for everybody.
And I think from what we've seen so far just on social media,
Yeah.
Blue Sky just had this massive conference where we've seen, I think there are a ton of people who care enough about this problem and are working on this protocol, who care about the same things we care about here, who are trying to fix a lot of the problems that might have come from the original exponential growth of Blue Sky, which is just like the exodus of people from X.
Yeah.
And the people are working hard on like tackling these problems, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Let me ask you something.
Mhm.
You mentioned you've been talking a lot about this critter called Space Cowboy.
Yeah.
Explain to me what that's about because I didn't really fully get what's going on there.
Right. So this creator essentially decided to experiment around with his own feed generator. It just took
On Blue Sky.
on Blue Sky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He just made a single service which uses collaborative filtering across your interaction history on AT protocol.
Follow-up question. You've mentioned collaborative filtering, and I realize that we both know what that is because we've been deep in this space, but
Right.
most people probably don't, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what that was before I came here. So
Yeah.
do you want to briefly explain what that is?
Yeah. The algorithm looks at, for example, if we're just looking at me and you, right? If I like water, if I like technology and podcast equipment, and you also like water, technology, and podcast equipment, and I, for example, also like race cars, it might recommend you race cars. And at a small example, like, it doesn't really make sense, but at a large example with maybe tens of thousands of interest vectors and tens of thousands of users, it ends up finding really engaging posts. So yeah, it's a very powerful algorithm. That's why like TikTok primarily and uses it, right?
So collaborative filtering is the gold standard in recommendation algorithms, or at
Yes.
least it was a while ago.
Yeah. And now, especially with these reels and short form based algorithms, it is the gold standard for maximizing engagement.
From what I understand, it creates sort of like an embedded interest vector for different users, and then tries to find like cosine similarity between engagement from certain from similar user vectors.
Yeah.
So they engage in similar looking posts,
Yeah.
or rather, a user that has a similar vector to you that engages in a new post, then it will then recommend that post to you as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
And collaborative filtering is the foundation to a lot of recommendation algorithms that exist now, right?
Yeah.
So part of your search is trying to figure out how to use collaborative filtering on a recommendation algorithm with a novel level of injected intentionality or agency in the search space, right?
So then, based off the collaborative filtering of these people who go off and search for a better feed, they seem to really enjoy it, like 50,000 likes, right? So just from seeing 50,000 people here using this feed, there's definitely demand, right?
It's representative demand. I really want to go try it. I feel like we put a lot of effort into trying to make our own custom feeds at the beginning. I feel like the solutions out there are just not quite ready yet. I think that's why is that why you've jumped into this? You feel like you could build a better solution. There certainly doesn't feel to be a co-pilot kind of framing out there.
I know there is some effort from people making feed generators to potentially allow introspection, but what I've seen there is you can't easily control or navigate your feed there. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, especially on the personalization on the UI UX side, to make it easier for people to make and share feeds.
Okay, so I have another tricky question for you. It seems like a core claim that you've been making. I haven't been gone so deep into feeds specifically. You know, I've been focused a lot more on content user verification, but you've been so deep on feeds. And your core thesis here is that it's a better feed that injects more intentionality will be a better experience for users. But my question is the answer just no feed or less feeds? Like what I felt like from leaving Reddit was that I feel happier. And I'm not like, oh, I wish there are a lot of things about Reddit that I liked, but my question to you is how do you rethink a feed in general? How do you think of something that's so dramatically different other than just slightly better feed?
So I think we should be experimenting with really big swings too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to this idea of potentially completely removing a vertically scrolling feed. For example, I think there's a team of researchers at Cornell Tech
Mm.
who recently took a week of Bluesky posts. It was 28 million posts, and they used LLMs to trace over that data, and they made 20,000 trails that you could follow, which are essentially just posts that have hyperlink connections to other posts, and the hyperlink has a topic associated with it, right?
Mm.
So they published that. You can check it out at skytrails.org. We'll put that in the description.
Mm.
And in my experience, kind of navigating through that, I felt like it wasn't engaging in the same way that a Wikipedia page is engaging, where you can traverse different content. Because with this short form content, the tags that were on the post just seemed too general. Um, so I think it definitely could be possible, but at least what I'm seeing, the problem I keep running into is the engagement is very low on exploring this feed where you have to inject your own agency into it.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost feel like we talked earlier about how you need to get a certain level of engagement that's entertaining enough
Yeah.
while also maintaining agency.
Hmm.
And I think this is a really good swing at the agency level, but
Hmm.
maybe is missing some of the engagement.
Right.
And it's a balancing act
Yeah.
where what I felt from getting rid of Reddit is that my, as you called it, web browsing,
Yeah.
or that my
Wait, web browsing is a valid term.
is that what you
I,
said? Web
yeah,
browsing?
yeah.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I like to web browse.
You like to web browse.
Yeah.
I felt like
Yeah.
my experience browsing the web has been a lot more intentional, and I want a platform that gives me this curation
Hmm.
while also being a co-pilot to me during my browsing,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm landing on, at least how I'm viewing this, is take the positive elements of collaborative filtering, take the potentially positive elements of scanning over a large data set of feeds and then finding topics between them, and combining that in a way where it's like you can leverage that people's curiosity from some pieces of content to other pieces of content, and like how can you kind of make like a seamless experience there. It seems like that's a open problem that a few people are looking at, but it
Mm,
hasn't been completely solved yet.
totally.
Yeah.
You mentioned something to me last week while you've been on this big deep dive, which is I wrote down the quote, every feed only goes in one direction, which is down. That
Mhm.
really resonated with me, but what exactly did you mean by that?
Right. So I meant with the popular social media platforms right now, you essentially don't have agency over your feed. You're scrolling down and you're asking the algorithm, what should my next piece of content be? And over time, it completely makes sense how this would be draining because you can't inject any of your curiosity into how you would collect new information. As opposed to, like, my favorite example of the opposite of this is something like going down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, which is like one
Mm,
of my favorite things ever.
yeah.
Like maybe you're reading a post about like how plants work, and you might end up on the Roman Empire. I think a lot of
Yeah.
pages end up on the Roman Empire, but you choose as you're going through a long form post what's capturing your attention, and then you choose, okay, I want to learn more about this topic, so you're going to go down that path. So that the emotion I feel kind of after I finish a deep dive session, and I find a natural closing point where I've learned some information is much better than the emotion I feel after I finish maybe an hour and 30 minutes of scrolling. It's like I don't even remember what I scrolled in that hour
Mm,
30 minutes, as opposed to this like rich like network of information I potentially could have gained from going down a Wikipedia rabbit hole.
totally.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think why that quote resonates so much with me is the world is not a single feed of information.
Mhm.
It's not this linear single dimension.
Mhm.
The world is this huge multidimensional tree of all these different paths you could follow. And Wikipedia almost lets you like drive the car and
Mhm.
decide what you want to read about and what directions you want to go. You can start with a question and then follow this question to its logical
Right.
conclusion versus just simply scrolling and asking a feed to give you the next piece of information. And you almost want you want to drive the car as opposed to just letting somebody else drive that information for you.
Right. And with long form media, though, you might be just getting information from one person or
Mm,
one entity, one organization, And I think short form media actually is very powerful because now you can get information from potentially millions of people. What you want to do though is give some weight to what they're saying, right?
Mm.
I definitely like the idea of some pre-processing layer where you can uh, make some like the example the work people did at Skytrails. You can make some connections between this information so it can feel like something like Wikipedia. Because before LLMs, you really couldn't do this, right?
Mm. Before LLMs, you couldn't take this massive amount of unstructured data on social media and create this Wikipedia-like experience where you get to drive through all these different posts and all these different ideas and create and answer the questions that you have. But now we're able to create these networks and these connections between all this different content on social media in a way that lets you inject significantly more intentionality in your experience online. Another thing you've mentioned a lot about existing feeds is because they're so centralized, there's no opt out. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Right. Opting out of a centralized feed means deleting the app.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be so binary.
Mm.
Either you're all in or you can't use the platform at all. You should be allowed to opt out of certain information threads, certain topics, certain views, and when you're given the granularity there, you can tailor what you're seeing instead of fully having to delete the app.
Mm. I can think of a really interesting counter argument, which
Okay.
is that like, isn't that the problem with the world and social media? Is that people can put themselves into their echo chambers and see exactly only what they want to see?
Right. I think people actually that's one argument for why social media is this really like amazing thing, right? I've definitely met a lot of people who think social media is amazing. I love it so much because they found their echo chamber. They
Mm.
found maybe a group of people who like circulate the same thoughts, and that provides them like joy and happiness, right? So like sure, yeah, that is like definitely one argument for why like people like it.
Mm. I think what I was getting at, which I think is the crux of your point,
Mhm.
which is the core incentive structure is if there's anything that makes me spend less time on the platform,
Okay.
don't allow it,
Yeah.
right? And if there's anything where I see enough information and I feel fulfilled and I stop, then that's a problem.
Hmm.
So it's almost like not allowing users to opt out of certain aspects of their feed or their
Hmm.
algorithm reinforces echo chambers. Because if you feel more enraged or you feel more frustrated or more angry about a certain topic, it makes you engage further in that topic. Or you feel more anxious about a topic, it makes you engage more with that topic. Not what is a accurate representation of the world or what is an accurate representation of what people are saying. It is what makes you engage more deeply with these topics.
Hmm.
So by injecting intentionality with a co-pilot, it might say, hey, you're engaging a lot with these viewpoints, which you might find really interesting. Just know that this is not an accurate representation of what a lot of people are saying. Are you cool with that? Right?
Interesting. So even like so for example, a metric or a line of like reasoning along the area of what you're seeing is one viewpoint, and like here are like other viewpoints for this topic, and
Mm.
potentially I don't know, I'm just like
Yeah,
thinking potentially
exactly.
you could even choose other topics to like potentially upvote because now you want to look into other alternative viewpoints
Totally.
of that thing that you did a deep dive into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the really cool thing about David Eagleman, where he
Yeah.
was like, I understand human psychology and I understand human bias so well. And I have formulated in my head an algorithm that will allow you to engage with other people's ideas in a way that circumvents your own bias to being really toxic or mad at them. Right. And I was like, that's really cool. I want to try to hack my biases in a way that I control. I want to hack my biases in a way that helps me and helps my understanding of the world, not that keeps me engaged on the platform longer. Right.
Right. And one claim Eagleman has is if you have two groups of people who are very polarized with each other, if one person from the group is able to connect with another person about something that where they can recognize each other's humanity, for example, like they connect over gardening, and then they follow that user over a long period of time, and then they see that the user is like not straight, right? They're either like bi or they're like LGBTQ, and previously they might have been very against that topic, but then say that they connected over gardening, then they'll be like, oh, okay, this is just like a person. They've like attributed some like humanist to this person, so they will maybe try to be a bit less strict on this kind of like radical concept or idea they have. But for me, I was just thinking it almost seems like you need a lot of like algorithmic control to do this. So I don't know if like a central player should be kind of like orchestrating what views are being kind of like um amplified or decreased.
I don't know if I think I agree with that broadly. I
Yeah.
just think that it's really important to understand that when you're building products,
Yeah.
I don't know if users make decisions for themselves based off of what's best for everybody.
Hmm.
They make decisions for themselves based off what they want to see,
Yeah.
right? So we could both say it's better if Instagram doesn't control the conversation around LGBTQ or whatever.
Mhm.
But in reality, people need to be able to inject intentionality themselves. And the only reason they would try this is because we're giving them a level of intentionality that big platforms explicitly won't give you because it will reduce your session time.
I see.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
We're okay, yeah, exposing the tools to do so. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our bet or our core thesis is that we can build tools in a way that helps you have exactly the experience you want on social media in a way that is counteractive to the incentives of big platforms.
Mhm.
That's kind of the crux of our thesis, right?
Yeah. I like that framing actually much more. So, giving you the tools to connect with people across viewpoints that are polarizing,
Mm,
so you can explore alternative paths easier. That makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the crazy things about mentioning David Eagleman's algorithm specifically is that it's really hard to bring up any example that doesn't make people angry because you want to be like, this will allow you to engage with a person deeply before you learn that they're a Trump supporter. And
Yeah.
someone listening to this is like, well, I don't fucking know that person. He's a Trump supporter. Or it's
Mm.
like, this
It's
lets
like,
you,
is the algorithm tricking me? It's like, oh, yeah, like who's controlling this, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's like, I want to engage with somebody very, very deeply before I learn that they're a liberal. And you're like, oh, they're fucking like socialist, whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
people are really agitated about these things because these platforms are so broken. And, well, whatever. That's a totally unrelated
Yeah.
point. But anyway, okay. So we want to
Okay.
wrap up with 5 minutes. So you've talked about a lot of really cool research and a lot of cool technologies on customized feeds,
Mhm.
injecting intentionality. If users are resonating with these problems and
Yeah.
they really feel like they want to try these things, what should they do?
Yeah, right. So we're working mainly on reducing the friction for people to manipulate their feeds in the way they want to, and like we said, have this co-pilot that can guide them as they scroll their feeds. Right. So if you do want to like try any of these feeds that we're working on, then you can go to the link in the description below, and you can sign up for an email list, and then we'll send that tool out to you. We're covering the compute, all the costs for like feed generation. So you can try that out.
I'm really excited to try what you built, and I'm really curious to see it. And I hope other people want to try it too.